finishing off the life and ministry of the Apostle Paul. Last week we read the last of his church epistles, okay, the ones that he wrote while he was waiting for his trial in Rome at the end of the book of Acts. This week we're reading 3 of his personal epistles to Timothy and Titus, as well as the book of Hebrews, okay, which most people believe that Paul had a hand in writing. I personally take the view that it looks to me like a team effort, okay, as you read through, there's a lot of we statements all the way through, but it seems likely that Paul had an influence in the construction and the content there in the book of Hebrews. But anyway, we'll get there later on. Before we look at these 3 letters, just want to say something a little bit about the last few books that we're going to be reading. To date, we've had the great advantage of having the book of Acts as a narrative, and so that's made it easier to place the dating of many of Paul's letters. But from now on, we don't have Acts anymore, and so it's a little more complicated to work out the exact chronology. We've kind of got to piece things together from the epistles and also some extra biblical historians that were around in the first century. But what it seems that happens is that after his release from Rome, Paul's trial apparently went well. He's back on the road again, okay? He's ministering, he's preaching, he's teaching, and he's writing letters. He might have gone to Spain. We don't really know. He was planning to go there. That's what he said to the Romans. It looks like he went to Crete, where he leaves Titus. He looks like he goes back to Macedonia and Asia and visits all his friends there. But what we do know is that after maybe about a 3-year trip, something like that, he ends back in Rome, back in prison again, and it is there that Paul is martyred, okay? He dies, so to speak, I'll get to that later, he dies for his profession of Christ. And this happens in what historically is known as the Neronic persecution, okay, the persecution of Emperor Nero. And that is a really important part of the biblical story to help understand the New Testament, and so important that I've decided yet again to do another bonus video on the decade of the 60s, okay? There's a lot of stuff that went down in the 60s, not the 1960s, I'm not going to be talking about the Beatles, okay? But in the 60s, there's a whole lot of stuff that happened in the background that sets the tone for these last New Testament books, and it's really important to have a grasp on that to understand what they're saying. So keep your eye out for that video this week. I think you're really going to enjoy that. All right, here we go. Timothy, Titus, and the book of Hebrews. I want to say a few things about Timothy and Titus, and then I'll check out Hebrews, okay? The first thing I want you to note as you read Timothy, Titus, and 2 Timothy is the relationship that Paul has with these men. They are young men, and they are basically his sons in the faith. We know that Paul's not married, he doesn't have any biological kids, and so he's really investing, as he nears the end of his life, he's investing into these young men to carry on his legacy. Basically, he's handing over the family business, okay, to these faithful young men. And so he really wants to instill in them some final words of wisdom. You also see in these letters, and I kind of hinted at it before, but his attitude again towards death. Paul knows that he is facing martyrdom, but he doesn't use the word death to describe that. As far as Paul's concerned, he's not going to die. All he's going to do is depart his body. Okay, he talks about running his race, finishing his course, fighting the good fight. A crown of righteousness is awaiting for me. The time for my departure has come. Not the time for my death has come. Why? Because Paul believes he has immortality in the gospel. Death is about being cut off from life. That's never going to happen to Paul. After all, Jesus said, those who believe in me will not die. Okay, what will they do then? Well, they'll simply depart, okay? And that's his mentality. He said it to the Philippians last week. He said it to the Ephesian elders in Acts chapter 20. Peter says the very same thing next week, and it comes out in these letters as well. My departure is near. And again, like I said last week, this is a very different mindset to what the Jews have always had. They never wanted to die, okay? They never wanted to go to Sheol, to be cut off from life. Paul does not have that concern. In fact, he's kind of looking forward to it, but in these last days that he has, he wants to invest into these spiritual sons. The other thing you're going to notice in these letters is some very common features about them, all right? He uses the phrase trustworthy saying. We've not seen that before, but he does it over and over again. These are kind of like nuggets of truth that you can take to the bank, son. Now, those type of things. Keep your eye out for that. He also mentions a lot the importance of having a clear conscience or a good conscience. Again, he's nearing the end of his life, so a good conscience is really important to him. I noticed that this week. The other thing he says over and over again is he talks about sound doctrine, all right? So notice that. He is instilling into his sons in the faith the importance of the scriptures and the importance of having sound teaching and sound doctrine. And the other thing that occurred to me, or that I noticed this week in these letters, is his use of the phrase Christ's appearing. The appearing of Christ. It's a very rare word in the New Testament. It's only used 6 times, but 5 of them are in these letters. And get this, it's the word epiphany, okay? We use that in English today. The epiphany of Christ. In these letters, he doesn't speak about the Lord's coming, but he speaks about the Lord's appearing. You know, when we've read the Lord's coming in other books, it kind of has this feeling of dread about it. Well, the Lord's appearing is a very hopeful thing. And what Paul might be doing is alluding to the fact that Jesus, one of the things that Jesus is our high priest. When the high priest on the Day of Atonement would go into the Holy of Holies, he would disappear behind the curtain. The people would not see him. He would disappear from their view. And they would wait for him while he sprinkled the blood in the holy place until he would reappear again. All right? And when he reappeared, they knew that the atonement was complete, that he had done it, the blood basically had done its job. And so it's possible he might be hinting at this hopeful appearing like the people used to hope for the high priest. Keep that in mind. And I mention that because that brings us to the book of Hebrews. Okay. Like Romans, Hebrews is this huge theological treatise on the gospel, okay? It's a big book. You probably want to read it in 2 sittings. And as I said before, many people believe that Paul had his hand in it. But unlike Romans, it's not written to a Jew and Gentile audience. Remember, we've been talking about that for weeks, about most of Paul's church letters have a mix of Jew and Gentile in them. Well, this letter is not. It's written wholly and solely to Hebrews. That's why we call it the book of Hebrews, okay? It is written exclusively to a Jewish audience. Exactly where, we don't know. In fact, it's probably designed to be circulated amongst Jewish Christians. But I need to stress this point, okay? Before you sit down and read Hebrews this week, you need to put yourself in a Hebrew mindset, okay? Put yourself in their shoes. Imagine yourself as a Jewish Christian. All your life, you've worshipped God according to Torah. You've gone to the temple 2 or 3 times a year. You've offered your sacrifices. You've come to the priest. You've celebrated the festivals that Moses prescribed. You've been sitting in synagogue, listening to the prophetic promises for your people that your God one day will bring about. And then you came to Christ. You discovered Jesus is the one we've been waiting for. The good news broke into your heart and you discovered a new way to worship God. You come now to God through Jesus Christ. But with that good news came some bad news. Much of your family, much of your kinsmen, much of your community that loves God and serves Him reject Jesus, and they begin to persecute you. You are cut out of the inheritance of your father, okay? Your property basically is taken from you. You are cut out of synagogue. You are excommunicated. You're no longer allowed in the temple. You know, God forbid that someone there sees you or knows that you worship Jesus. You are now an outcast in your own community. That is the mindset that you need to have as you read the book of Hebrews, because that is who it was written to. Okay? The overarching theme of Hebrews, as I kind of mentioned them, is worship. Okay? It's about how we, as Hebrew people, have worshipped God, how we've had a relationship with Him. But the fact that Jesus has come along and has brought about something greater than we ever had before. okay, the new that Jesus has brought is superior to the old that we've enjoyed for the last 14 centuries. The prophets, the angels, Moses, Torah, Mount Sinai, the glory, the blood sacrifices, Aaron, the priesthood, all that stuff, as good as it was, has been outclassed, okay, and outdated by the new that has come in Jesus Christ. Jesus is the culmination of all our history. All these things are but shadows that pointed to the substance of Jesus. All these things are but rituals that have pointed to the reality that we have found in Christ. Okay, He is the reality, and that's what maturity is, or perfection is. We as a people, okay, have come to maturity. Maturity is about accepting Christ and knowing that He is the culmination of all these things we've been looking forward to. And so you see this constant comparison in the book of Hebrews, which always ends with warnings. Okay, the warning of the authors is, while we are committed to Christ, but coming under pressure from our families, coming under pressure from the old guard to go back to the inferior system, he said, I want to warn you, don't go that. Don't go back there, okay? Think about the Hebrew heroes of the past, okay? Men and women of faith who persevered under trial because they knew God was doing a new thing in the day. People of faith, be like them and don't shrink back to Jerusalem. Don't shrink back to temple worship. There is no future in that system anymore. It's served us well up till now, but there is no future, so don't go back there. Why? Because, my friends, the culmination of our history has reached its fulfillment in Jesus. The age of the ancients, the patriarchs, the judges, the kingdom, the divided kingdom, the restored second temple, okay, all those ages, the culmination has come in Jesus. Don't go back to the old, okay? And that's what we really need to understand. Jesus has come and He has made the old system of worship obsolete. He's made it redundant. He's replaced it with something far superior, but it's still there, okay? It hasn't been removed. It still exists, okay? The people there in Jerusalem are propping it up still, okay? There's this generation of priests and religious leaders who've refused to believe in Jesus. They have refused to believe in His blood. They have, as it were, insulted the Spirit of grace by doing so, and they are propping up a system that God has said at the cross, I am done with. So it's redundant, okay? It's been replaced, but it's not yet been removed, and the Jews at this period of history still, if they choose to, can go back to that system. And the author is saying, don't do that. There is no future there. There is coming a time where these created things will be shaken and ultimately removed. In the meantime, don't go back there, because one day it's all going to come down in flames. All right? That's basically the mode you need to be in when you put yourself in the shoes or the sandals, if you like, of these original audience as you're reading. Okay? Timothy and Titus are really easy. Read Timothy, Titus, and then 2 Timothy in that order in one sitting. Hebrews you might have to split into 2 sittings. Okay? Maybe chapter 1 to 8 and then 10 to 13. And keep your eye out this week for my bonus video on the devastating decade of the 60s as we understand some of the historical background. Bless your heaps, guys. 2 more weeks to go after this. Thanks for joining with me, and I'll see you then.
That's it for today's lesson. I really hope you enjoy your readings this week. Remember, allow yourself time to read as much as you can in one sitting. Don't get lost in the detail. Just keep going and watch the Bible's big story unfold before you. Remember also to hit me up on our social media channels or website, and I'll see you next time.